So I'd like to use my love of computers and strange love of statistics and data analytics that not many people share. And I can actually use that to improve the medical world and improve public health.
Hello, Patricia. How are you?
I'm very good, Jory. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm very excited to be on here. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's jump right in.
Great.
Tell us a little bit about your journey and where you are.
Yeah. I have had, like many doctors, a lifelong dream of becoming a doctor. And it started when I was very young. My mom was a nurse, my grandpa was a doctor, my uncle was a doctor. It's just something that always really appealed to me. I was one of those weird kids that like would play Dr. Barbie, and like my patient Barbies would get in strange accidents and stuff like that. And it was probably not what normal kids would do playing with their Barbies, but that was what I did anyway. And then I started my medical career at Ross University School of Medicine. So that's a Caribbean medical school. It's in the small island of Dominica. There's a lot of schools that are like that are kind of outside of the US sphere. They started in Caribbean islands, and it will take largely a lot of US students, but we'll take a lot of foreign medical graduates as well, a lot from Canada. So I
So are
pursued
you,
my
so sorry,
oh,
so you are considered a foreign medical graduate as well?
yeah, so there's like international medical graduates that are US citizens like me that went to a school that is US accredited, but it's not on US soil. And then there's the foreign medical graduate.
Yeah,
Those are the
got it.
graduates who, went to school abroad
That's
and then
me.
came here. Yeah, like you. And a lot of doctors I know, honestly.
Yeah. Right.
We
So you
kind
were
of
saying something.
intermingle a lot in our
Hmm.
rotations, so we get to know each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you were saying something.
Oh, yeah. So I went through my rotations. I went to my first 2 years in Dominica. I learned a lot about the people on the island. I went to a lot of clinics on the island, which was a really cool experience. Um, and then I went to the US for my clerkship rotations. So that means I'm rotating through all the different subspecialties to see what I'm interested in. Um, and then I graduated from medical school and I started working as a clinical documentation specialist. I started before then kind of as a scribe, kind of jumping around from job to job, but I settled into being a clinical documentation specialist after I graduated.
Awesome. So tell us what a clinical documentation specialist does.
Yeah. A lot of people have no idea. That's kind of the
Yeah.
first question I get. And a lot of doctors don't really know either.
Mm.
It's actually kind of a newer job, and it's kind of more for, it's bigger on kind of the coastal hospitals and is kind of growing in in attention and kind of spreading toward the middle between the doctor, the clinician, and the uh, coding and billing department. It says my internet connection's unstable. Can you still hear me?
I can now. Yeah, you froze for a second, but that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so we're the middleman between essentially the doctor and the coder. So the coders kind of have their own coding language, and the doctors have their clinical language. So we're the nurses and the doctors that kind of work between the two, and we'll ask questions to the doctor and to the coding specialist to make sure the medical record looks clear. There's a lot of people that look at the charts after, long after the patient has been discharged, for medical research or for data analytics. And so we kind of make sure everything is clear and basically everyone's dotted their I's and crossed their T's, and it looks good, basically.
So from being an IMG, not having a license, how challenging was it to get into clinical documentation?
Um, it was a job that just hasn't been, a lot of doctors are just not aware that it exists. So honestly, I think the biggest challenge at first was finding out that the job existed, because
Yeah.
there's just not a lot of opportunities for unmatched doctors. I mean, we're told to go to, we can try to be a research assistant, we can try to be a scribe under another doctor. Typically don't get paid more than like 12, $13 an hour for that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really hard finding the job, but I actually found out from another friend who happened to work in this company in California, and she told me about the job. After that, it is still a bit of a challenge because it's actually primarily still very much an RN job, a nursing job. So doctors are kind of slowly, unmatched doctors are kind of slowly getting into that world. And not every hospital is accepting of that. A lot of them will be like, oh, we're RN only. So it kind of has, you kind of have to find connections to find the places that will accept a lot of what is primarily IMGs and FMGs that are unmatched getting into these positions.
Yeah.
After that, you do have to take exams for certificates that are required. A lot of them will require a couple of certifications from a couple of different certifying bodies. And so you may end up taking a lot of different little tests, and the money can kind of add up. But it does open doors for more opportunities in more hospitals. So it was a little bit of a challenge. I have had some gaps here and there, but once you kind of get on that track, it becomes a little bit easier to find a hospital that's accepting MDs.
Are you comfortable sharing how much IMGs can make in a clinical document as a clinical documentation specialist,
Yes, of
roughly?
course. Yeah, and honestly, that really depends on your level of experience. So, and where you're starting. And so the place where I started, they accept a lot of international and foreign medical graduates. That's what they specialize in. I started there. The people just before me started at $17 an hour. I was at $22 an hour. Eventually, I've worked my way up to a contract position making $53 an hour. I've heard of some people making upwards of $100 an hour. So it really depends. There's like a huge variety. Also depends on what state you live in. So
Mm-hmm.
fairly decent pay. Certainly
Yeah.
not attending pay, but it certainly got me back up on my feet. Thank God.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. What do you think are the challenges that IMGs are facing when they are applying for residencies and after not matching?
Yeah, so an enormous amount of challenges. So it's known to most of us going into this that we are not on the priority, that the US medical graduates are the ones that are likely going to be prioritized for most residency positions. We understand that going in. I don't think that it hit most of us just how difficult it is until after we started applying to residencies. I mean, we're given some resources, but I feel like in a lot of these schools, there's just not enough. And there's not enough. And knowing that it's harder for us to match into medical residencies, there's not enough follow up and making sure that a student is prepared the next year to match into a residency. So I've also come to find that, you know, there's just more and more people applying for these residencies every year. And as a US student, I think you're typically told to apply to maybe 50 programs. For a IMG or an FMG, you're told to apply for 150 applications to 200 per specialty that you're applying to.
I think I applied 300 my third year.
Yeah, I applied, I think maybe 300 my first year. I think maybe like 150, 200 my second year. I just didn't have the money to expand it further out than that. And, you know, of course, the price goes up every year.
Yeah.
So we're just tossing all this money in there. We're already hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt going through this whole process. And then a lot of the times programs will, because they receive so many applications, will weed certain people out based on filters. And we know that a lot of us are going to get filtered out because sometimes they will specifically filter out international and foreign medical graduates when looking at applications. They'll filter out people who are a couple years out from their graduation. The further you are out from your graduation, the less likely you're going to match. And that it dramatically goes down. I think I read statistics on Medscape that in 2021, the people who had not graduated in 2021, their likelihood, their rate of matching was 50%. So half of them didn't have a chance. So those filters really get us, and we're always talking about those filters and like, oh, how can we get around them? And so we're the ones also just making tons of phone calls to a lot of programs, trying to get ourselves out there, trying to get people to see, to look past those filters. And actually, a lot of those programs are now not answering the phone calls anymore and are not reading those emails and are sending messages out during the match process that say, we will not read those emails. We will not have those phone calls. We're just going to go off of your application. So it's just like this constant battle, not to mention that IMGs and FMGs, these are people who are part of a population that really needs to get more medical care and more attention. These are people from these tight-knit communities that may not always trust the medical system as it is. They want to see a doctor that represents them. They want to see somebody who they recognize and they can sorry, allergies, and can relate to. And
Yeah.
those people aren't being selected because these are the people who couldn't get into US schools. So they're trying to go for these international schools and they're just not being accepted. They're not, sometimes it's just a matter of not fitting into a certain program because they're not like everybody else and they're not going to be selected. And this is a huge problem. And it's a problem that's recognized in the public health community as well. So a lot of these doctors end up years out desperately just pouring money into this process. These are the people that, you know, there's just not a lot of medically, when you have an MD, that doesn't mean that you can become a medical assistant. It doesn't mean that you can be a pharmacy tech. It doesn't mean, all of these require separate certifications that require more money, more time, and may not even necessarily guarantee a job. So then you have a lot of people who are doctors. Your doctors, your future doctors are your Uber drivers, they're your dishwashers, they're your garbage collectors. I know of people who actually have these jobs right now, and they're just desperately trying to apply for a position every year. And I think what a waste of resources. You know, like we're always talking about a doctor shortage, and we have them. They're here, but
Yeah.
we just don't utilize them properly. So I feel like as a CDS, at least I feel like I'm using my degree. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm still involved. I'm still reading patient charts. I'm still keeping up with continuing medical education. And that makes me feel quite a bit better. But there's just so many massive amounts of challenges for IMGs and FMGs. So yeah,
So in this role of clinical documentation specialist, is there room for growth?
yes, there is, luckily. A lot of these CDSs will go on to managerial positions further up the chain. So you can be, for example, a group leader. So you're managing over a group of clinical documentation specialists. You can move up to higher managerial positions that in the realm of basically administrative positions within a hospital system. So it's mostly like inpatient CDI at the moment, but the outpatient world is growing as well, and I'm sure there are positions growing there too. So a lot of my directors started off as clinical documentation specialists, and now they are part of the hiring process for clinicians, and they take a huge role in the hospital setting, and they're kind of just under the C-suite. So there's definitely a lot of room for growth if you want to pursue that.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, fingers crossed, I'm getting a master's in public health at the George Washington University. And I'd like to finish that degree. I've kind of been delaying it for the time being because I've been moving. It's my chaotic background. But I see myself, I'm getting emphasis in health analytics. So I see myself in a role in which I am integrating billing and coding that I've learned in the CDI world, and I'm integrating that into the public health world. So I'd like to use my love of computers and strange love of statistics and data analytics that not many people share. And I can actually use that to improve the medical world and improve public health. So there's a lot of health information management and public health jobs that are associated with that. But I think I'm always going to be very involved in advocacy and particularly through writing and just trying to educate people who are not in the medical world as to how the medical world works, because I feel like there's very much kind of a disconnect there. And I just always want to help with that growth and understanding. So probably something pretty similar to the job that I have right now, but I think something a lot more far reaching and something that gives me a sense of fulfillment. So
Yeah. And what would you say to the IMGs and FMGs that may be listening? I quite a bit of my audience is the FMGs who haven't matched and are struggling to find a job.
yeah. And I've actually had I'm very open about my experience, and in a lot of the Facebook groups that I'm in that kind of are for my school or for unmatched physicians, I like to tell my story and I like to get the word out there. And a lot of them contact me about my job and how they can get into it.
Mm-hmm.
So for the FMGs and IMGs out there, I want to say that I deeply feel your struggle and I know that it is so tough. Please understand that your struggles are real. There's a lot of people that are going through that same path that you are. You are not alone. That is something that people come to me all the time. They'll say, I feel like such an idiot. Like, what am I doing wrong? I feel like I'm all alone. I'm like, you are not alone. You need to keep going. Do not give up. I've heard stories of people who have matched 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. So if that truly is your dream, please do it. It didn't work out for me, and that is okay. You have a few options, but it's okay to tell your story. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to let people know outside of medicine that it is hard for us because they don't know. They don't know how IMG, FMG,
Yeah.
all that stuff works. It's up to us to tell them. And we kind of keep it wrapped up and minimized. And, I'm very scared to tell my story, but I've only seen I've seen enormous benefits to telling my story. There's some people that they're gonna come at you and they might minimize what your story is, or say maybe it's not that big of a deal, or well, maybe you shouldn't be a clinician anyway. Well, you should. You've given up everything. You've uprooted your families. You've moved to a new place. Uh you've revamped your entire life around this, and you deserve to be listened to and you deserve to have your story told. So please tell it and please advocate for yourself, because there are movements happening now that are allowing more representation for unmatched doctors. And a lot of that world is in public health. So for me, public health has like reinvigorated my soul. I was so downtrodden and just felt so dejected and so depressed. There are people who say, like, I'm deeply depressed. I feel lost. I feel hopeless. Just, feel those feelings and get your word out there. Please talk to people. It's so important.
Thank you so much for your sharing your journey and being vulnerable with me. If somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
I don't have a huge social media presence, unfortunately, but they can find me. I'm in a lot of the physician groups on Facebook. So I'll be around there. I'm Patricia McGuire on Facebook. And I have a LinkedIn profile as well, Patricia McGuire, with all my fancy letters afterwards. So I'm Patricia McGuire, CCS, CDIP, MD. It's a lot of letters. But yeah, those are kind of the two main places where people can contact me.
Thank you so much, Patricia. It was so good talking to you. I think you're going to help a lot of people, and your passion for your IMG and FMG community shows. Yeah, I would say the same thing. Keep telling your story so that more people can be helped.
Thank you. And I've seen you tell your story a lot, and you really use your talents to kind of enliven the non-clinical MD world. And I love that. I think that's fantastic. And I hope that you keep going down that road. It seems like you're getting great responses from people. So I'm cheering for you too.
Thank you. Thank you. I will talk to you again.
All right,
Take
great. Thank you so much.